I don't know if this happens to you, but this time of year, a number of people will stop me on the street and ask, "What's up, Frank Boerger?" And it's been 26 years since Frank Boerger strode on this earth, and it's hard to believe it's been so many years. But we have an award in honor of him. Who here knew Frank Boerger? All right, it's a declining number of people, and I guess that's why John asks me to come up and give a few remembrances of his life. Frank Boerger, B-O-E-R-G-E-R, was a man, not a concoction of a Frankfurter and a hamburger. He was born in South Dakota. He enlisted in World War II, served with distinction as an enlisted man in Europe. After World War II, along with his brother Philip, who became a major general, was admitted to West Point and became an Army officer, an engineer officer. He got a master's degree in civil engineering following graduation from West Point, and then he saw further combat action in Korea, where another of our fallen colleagues also served, Charlie Roberts, and still later in Vietnam. There's a slide that I was hoping, can you all see it? That's the man. He was a big man. He also played football at West Point. He was a Welshman, quite emotional. And in 1966, he was recalled from Vietnam, and after 30 years of service in the military, was given his last post, which was as district commander of the San Francisco Corps, of the San Francisco office of the Corps of Engineers. He served there in that capacity from 1966 to 69. Now, if you think about it, 1966 was the year that BCDC came into existence, because the McAteer-Petras Act was enacted by the legislature in 1965. The district commander of the Corps' San Francisco office is a commissioner on BCDC. So Frank was also one of the first BCDC commissioners, one of the first 27 that were seated at BCDC during the time that the San Francisco Bay Plan was being developed. And we know what the Bay Plan calls for: no further filling of the bay, among other things, and if possible, removing some of the fill that had been placed. At the Corps of Engineers in 1959, it had published the San Francisco 1960 to 2020, a completely different vision of the bay that imagined all of the bay being filled in except for the deep water channels being left open for navigation. So Frank Boerger left the Corps of Engineers that had come up with that plan in 1959 and went to BCDC and was part of the architect of the Bay Plan, which called for exactly the opposite. These were, imagine, quite historic times, quite momentous times. He retired from the Army after 30 years of distinguished service and having seen combat in 3 wars in 1969, and went to work for Harding Lawson. And very soon, in 1973, the Golden Gate National Recreational Area was formed and established a Citizens Advisory Committee, which Frank chaired. And I think it's the GGNRA Association, I forget, that evolved from that Citizens Advisory Committee. He presided over more than 100 meetings of that to try to gain consensus, trying to give you a feel for the great citizenship that Frank Boerger exhibited during his last years in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was certainly one of our proudest soldiers, having served in 3 wars, and now he's a citizen here. And in 1982, he and Charlie Roberts, a couple of others, called me and Bill, I think you were there right at the beginning, and said we need to form an organization, and those early meetings in the fall of 1982 led to the founding of the Bay Planning Coalition at the end of that year. Charlie Roberts, who succeeded Frank as district commander of the Corps' San Francisco district, became our first chairman. We called them chairmen or chairs in those days, and there's that compulsion to change names, like the State Department of Fish and Game. Well, we've called it that for a long time. We got to call it something else, so we'll give it a new name. We'll call it the Department of Fish and Wildlife, so people will forever confuse it with the counterpart federal agency. So we've changed. What's Dave now called? You're called president, or? Yeah, something like that. All right, but they were chairs at the time. So Charlie Roberts was our first one, and in November of '85, Frank Boerger became our second chair. In 1990, Frank prevailed upon me to take over as chair of the Bay Planning Coalition, and he had a rather persuasive way. He reminded me a lot of my late father, who had died 25 years before. So on July 17th, we had a board meeting. I was formally selected chair, and I recalled, I had to give the eulogy at my father's funeral. I was 16 years old, and I recall reflecting how men don't say what they really feel about another man that they love and respect, but on one occasion, the occasion of that man's funeral. And I thought, well, doggone it, this is an important moment, and I don't want to wait for Frank's funeral. And so I prepared remarks in honor of Frank that reflected, very uncharacteristically of me, my serious feelings about him. And by golly, that big man began to tear up, and I realized I was going to embarrass him terribly if I kept up. I began. All too often, a man expresses his real feelings, his real affection for another man on the occasion of that man's funeral, and I don't want that to happen. And it was that vein of speaking that got Frank in tears. So I quickly stopped, became the usual wise ass that I am, and concluded. I drove back. I was in the middle of a trial in Fresno, I think, drove back to the Central Valley, and got a phone call the next morning that at 1 o'clock the morning of July 18th, Frank died, just 9 hours after I said those words. So we decided, by golly, we're going to have an award that we give annually, and it's got to be to somebody very, very special, somebody who embodies all the qualities that Frank Boerger had. And I would like to go on and wax rhapsodic about the fittingness of the recipient of the award this year, but I'll leave that to Richard Sinkoff, my good friend, who, straight from the pages of Gentleman's Quarterly, the man that Willie Brown calls to say, what sort of tie should I wear with this suit? Richard.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a hard act to follow. In 1863, the state of California established the Port of San Francisco. The port's most important project was to build the 4-mile seawall across Yerba Buena Cove, thereby establishing the San Francisco Embarcadero and Financial District, and laying the foundation for the San Francisco growth as a major seaport and great urban center. Great seaports and great cities require great leaders with razor-sharp business acumen, clear long-term vision, and a refined and empathic sense of community. Our awardee exemplifies all of these qualities. Her business accomplishments at the Port of San Francisco are wide-ranging, from the 34th America's Cup to the new cruise terminal, to facilitating over $1 billion in private investment in Port of San Francisco assets. Her long-term vision is keen. Under her leadership, the Port of San Francisco righted itself financially, completed its 2016 to 2021 strategic plan, and she consistently reminded the public, business, government, and city leaders of the need to invest in that over 100-year-old seawall. Most importantly, she gets the people part of our business. Great ports are made up of great people in service to society and the public. Professionally, I have seen her walk the talk, reaching out to establish collaborative working relationships with my port, the Port of Oakland, highlighting the individual contributions of Port of San Francisco employees, tenants, and individual businesses that make the Port of San Francisco the working port, the diverse and vibrant port that it is. One example, however, is worth of special mention. As past president of the California Association of Port Authorities, our awardee staunchly supported the establishment of the California Association of Port Authorities Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Task Force. The LGBT Task Force is arguably the first in the nation, if not globally, to recognize the contributions and potential of LGBT individuals in building a strong and sustainable maritime industry. In my view, this advocacy took great courage and a clear moral compass, which are truly the qualities of great leadership. For all these reasons and more, please join me in congratulating this year's recipient of the 2016 Frank C. Boerger Award, former San Francisco Port Director and now Senior Manager, Director of CBRE Global Workplace Solutions, Monique Moyer. Now, before you make your remarks, Monique is going to make some remarks. I did hear that there was a little surprise from the Port of San Francisco. Is that correct? Someone from the port would like to come up. So we have an extra special treat.
Hello there. I'm Renee Martin, the Public Relations Manager at the Port of San Francisco. And we couldn't let Monique get away without presenting a plaque to her from the Port of San Francisco. During her nearly 12 years of tenure there at our port, she's given hundreds of plaques away to other people. So we thought it was appropriate to give her a plaque from the Port Commission and the employees of the Port of San Francisco for her great work and legendary contributions to San Francisco waterfront.
Hi. Well, I know I'm standing between all of you and lunch, so I will try to be short, but I would like to share a few words. First, I'd like to start by thanking John Coleman and all of the staff at BPC, as well as David Ivester, Richard Sinkoff, the entire board of directors, and you, the members of our community that have made today possible, and for selecting me for this incredible recognition. It is just humbling to even be following in the footsteps of the 14 honorees that have gone before me. I don't think the list of names was mentioned today, but I know some of you are in the room and you've all been my idols, so I just can't believe I'm in that same crowd. And then to have my name used in the same sentence as Frank's is beyond humbling. Frank's commitment and service to our country and to our community far eclipse anything that I could ever dream of, and to be encompassed into his legacy is an extraordinary honor, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for that. I also want to thank you for being part of this community. As you heard Richard mention, the Port of San Francisco was founded 153 years ago. I sincerely doubt that at that era anybody thought that a group like this would be necessary to advocate on behalf of our maritime community. In fact, in those days, everything revolved around maritime. No one ate, no one transported, no one communicated without doing so by water. So it probably would come as a huge surprise and disappointment for our founders to know that we need now to raise our voices loud, to be heard, to be recognized, to fight for resources and reinvestment. But I'm so pleased that we do. And I thank you for your quest in seeking full reimbursement of the HMT, for your consistent voices to be heard on getting WRDA consistently appropriated, for your ongoing environmental stewardship, and now for your recognition and education about sea level rise and its impacts. I very much miss my office at Pier 1 in San Francisco, but I can tell you each and every day I got to see the water coming up over the sidewalk, and sea level rise is definitely very, very real in my mind. Port of San Francisco sits physically and metaphorically at the intersection of land and water, man-made and nature-made. It is a huge responsibility. It is a place where people come for maritime commerce, transportation, where wealth is won and where wealth is lost. It has been a great honor to be port director, and 12 years ago today was my first day as port director. So this is kind of an interesting, I just realized today that it was today. This is kind of an interesting symbolism, maybe an interesting closure of that. And I just want to say that it was just an incredible journey. It was, in the rearview mirror, something that has made astounding change for San Francisco. And one thing that the port taught me each and every day was that what we do today benefits not just our generation, but generations to come. What our founders did in 1863, we're still talking about 153 years later. So please remember that as you bang your head against that HMT wall over and over and over again. But what we accomplished in the last 12 years was due to the vision and the dedication and the sheer will of hundreds of people. So I'd like to ask those members of the Port of San Francisco here today to stand and remain standing. So if you would, please. Thank you. Please remain standing. I'd like to ask all of those members of the port's tenants, operators, community advisory committees, if any of you are in the room, to also stand. Anybody who is a member, thank you. Anybody who is a member of a regulatory agency that does business with the port or a partner agency, and Will, Travis, I'll count you in on that if you wouldn't mind standing. Is that, yeah, I thought I saw Larry, yeah. And then any of you who are friends or advocates for the Port of San Francisco to stand, please. That should be all the rest of you. Come on, stand up. So I understand that the former First Lady and potential First President is in Oakland today, and you know that she wrote a book called It Takes a Village. And my staff have heard me say that the Port of San Francisco has succeeded by its village. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the Port of San Francisco's village. These accomplishments are your accomplishments. You share in Frank's legacy and now in mine. Thank you very much.